So it's the end of TT, and certainly this year there's been no deaths on the open roads. So I thought talk to the Chief Constable about that. I mean, only a couple of weeks ago we were doing the TT sort of drive safely campaign and that sort of thing. It paid off?
It paid off. No one died. That's the important thing. Collisions were down 15%, but it's very important not to get carried away. 29 people were involved in serious collisions. So that's 29 people who could have lost their lives, and the margin between life and death on the roads on a motorbike is often very slim indeed. It can be inches.
Well, that's interesting to say that. So, I mean, really, you're not patting yourself on the back completely. It was just a bit of luck in there as well?
It was a lot of hard work, and it was a lot of effort on people's parts to get the message across about riding safely. My staff who worked on the roads this year were absolutely terrific. They couldn't have been better. But we've got to get the message across to the few individuals who still don't listen and who still try to ride like lunatics.
Well, I mean, Derek Flint was saying himself, and I went out on patrol with him and we were in the unmarked car. In the past I've done that. The odd bikes whiz by, he's had to beep him and get him to come in and whatever. Now, we didn't have one of those. It's all the way around the course, which is quite interesting. And he was saying himself on all his blogs that he reckoned there had been a mind change to some degree on the drivers, the riders over here.
I think there has been. I think there's probably three things at play. I think we've policed the mountain part of the course differently. We've put a new plan in place, and the road policing staff worked so hard to make that work. So I think that's one thing. The second thing is, I think the road safety message this year, the campaign was a good one, respect our roads. And I spoke to lots of bikers and lots of visitors who said that struck a chord with them. And thirdly, I think there's a demographic change in that the people who came to the TT, to me, and I saw thousands of them, seemed a bit older. Right. And they may be a bit wiser.
Now, I've always seen these pictures in the past of people queuing up to pay fines. I mean, it does bring you in a bit of money. I'm not sure that's the reason you do it, but in that sense, were you up or down on people being fined?
Fewer people were detected for speeding. Right. And we don't do it for money, we do it to make the road safe. What's really interesting is I spoke to some really experienced officers who've policed the TT for 10, 15 years, and they're saying that years ago they'd come back from a day of speed enforcement with 15, 16, 17 people caught. This year they were coming back with one or two. So there are real positives. People have changed their behaviour, but the very fact that we still had 29 serious collisions is, to me, 29 too many.
Okay, well, I mean, as you say, maybe the demographics are changing because the old days of drugs, sex, rock and roll, biking, that sort of thing. And on that, drugs, I mean, it used to be quite a headline figure that the dogs would be patrolling, and people literally never saw the TT. They'd come off the boat and straight into Victoria Road. What's it been like this year?
We've had a handful of arrests for drugs, 2 or 3 from off the boat. Our focus is less on that, less on catching people who have small bits of drugs for their personal possession, more on the safety of people, because each road death is the loss of a loved one for someone. Much more on that, and much more about dealing with drug supply. And we have officers who do all sorts of clever things in regards to drugs. So the priorities are a bit different than they were sort of in the 80s and 90s.
Okay, I mean, we're doing this interview, it all sounds like it's been pretty good news. I mean, anything you were worried about, anything that's concerning you?
I think it was a terrific TT. I know one rider lost his life in the racing, in the practicing, which is very, very tragic. But when we look at the event is now a very professionally run event, and the police play a fairly remote part in the management and the planning of it, but we work very closely with the clerk of the course, and the response to the dreadful crash on Friday at the bottom of Bray Hill was absolutely terrific. It couldn't have been better.
Take us through that. I mean, because obviously you're very much involved, but it was still a racing issue, wasn't it, or something? They were in charge and you were doing your bit, but you didn't take over? I mean, help me out.
The police have a duty to respond when something potentially awful happens. So we were told that a bike had gone into the crowd, so we implemented our response plan. And the response plan sees a proper command structure being put in place. So one of the superintendents acted as the silver commander, the tactical commander, and he had charge of it. I was the gold commander, and I brought together chief executives from government departments and liaised with the hospital management, and we came up with an appropriate plan so that the people of the Isle of Man had a proper medical service, and that as a secondary thing, if we were able to run the race, we were able to run the race, which was what happened. And the job of the police is to coordinate things, and it's very important that people understand that if someone crashes in racing, we only have the grounds to investigate it when it's a fatal or potentially fatal collision. The coroner inquest has been very clear about what he wants us to do and when he wants us to do it. The race organisers are very clear about what they want us to do, and between all of us, we've come up with what I think is an appropriate way of dealing with things.
And is there any pressure on you to get this sorted at ASAP so the racing can go ahead?
There's no pressure on us. we have to do what's right to be done, and on Friday we had to make sure that two things were in place, and the meeting that I referred to that I chaired was very much about, has the hospital the capacity to deal with things that happen on a daily basis in the Isle of Man? And if we've got thousands of people on motorbikes, are they able to deal with road traffic collisions? Are they able to deal with people who have heart attacks? Are they able to deal with the normal things? And then secondary, can they deal with racing? And if so, when can they deal with it?
And finally, what about the slight criticism that some might come up with, that you shut the mountain road at the drop of a hat and keep it closed for many hours now, whereas in the old days there's more pressure to get it open again?
I've got colleagues who work with me and for me who have escaped serious injury by inches when they've been dealing with collisions on the road in the past, and we've kept the roads open and people come through an accident scene or a collision scene at great speed. That's nonsensical. We have to make it safe for the officers who do it, and that is precisely what we do. So as soon as something happens that requires a road closure, we'll close the road for the safety of the member of the public who's involved and the safety of the officers and the ambulance staff and whoever else happens to be there dealing with it.
And really finally, staffing levels, were you okay yourself with all these cutbacks you've had? Were you happy with what you had on the streets?
We policed TT brilliantly, I thought. I would say that because I'm biased, but actually people who know me know I'm never satisfied, never ever satisfied that we can do things as to the best degree. I was so impressed with what I saw from us this TT. It was long and hard, the weather was really good, people did it with a smile on their face, they didn't complain, they did everything that I wanted them to do. I would have to single out the roads policing staff, and they're supplemented by detectives, so it's not just normal traffic officers. They were absolutely first class. They couldn't have been better.